Thanks for coming, everyone. This is a panel on 3D audio, virtual reality. My name's Seth Schachner. I'm a digital business consultant. I work in sunny Miami, Florida. My background's in digital business, worked for Sony Music for many years. Kind of at the space of putting content partnerships together, so a lot of digital music experience. I'm really happy to be here today. Let's do a little brief round of introductions, guys.
Hey guys, I'm John Eades. I work at Abbey Studios in London, which I'm hoping some of you know. It's a modern recording studio. And I've, about 2 years ago, launched an incubation program run out of the studios, specifically for companies working in audio technologies, music technologies. One of the threads that we're super keen on is 3D audio, which has brought me here.
Hi, my name is Sneek. I'm the founder of Snake Productions. Created several music VR experiences for Gear and now also for Oculus and HTC Vive.
Hi, my name is Christian Sander. I'm CEO and co-founder of D-Reality, not Snake Productions. But it's nice. Yeah, we create 3D audio and virtual acoustics technology for VR, AR, and gaming. And we are preparing platforms to really have the full workflow pipeline with our DVI engine to create content for VR and AR.
Hey, my name is Fabio Buccheri. I'm founder and CEO of NOYS VR Music, a platform for social VR concerts, basically.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I represent Audiokinetic, where I work as an audio and VR evangelist. We have a product called NOYS, which is basically a middleware tool, audio tool, that helps developers to implement audio into their games and VR, AR experiences.
Great, thank you. So if I can just hopefully engage you a little bit, can you give me a sense, how many of you know what 3D audio is or have some understanding of it, yeah? So a lot of you. Okay, well, we probably don't need to do the most basic definitions then, but why don't we just take a crack at kind of a general definition of 3D audio, why it's different from surround sound or others, and why you think it's important for this new emerging virtual reality sector. Anyone, whoever wants to jump in. Keep in mind, we've got a qualified crowd here. So.
I think the easiest way to describe 3D audio is really that we try to emulate how we actually hear things in real life. So we have basically 360 around us. We can hear up, we can hear down, behind us, in front of us. That's the main difference, so to speak.
I mean, the wording of 3D audio always mixes up with spatial audio, positional audio, immersive audio, and all that. So I think positional audio is more a good definition to, if we talk about object-based audio, we have sound sources moving around you, and then of course if we talk about spatial audio, it's I have the feeling it's more also the acoustical cues in that. So the definition isn't that clear, but I mean there are different standards going to be there in the future that will fix that, hopefully.
But I mean, 3D audio, I often get out in the business world trying to put partnerships together. Common question is, why is it different than surround sound? You know, I mean, let's take a stab at that. I mean, it's a spatialization of audio. Comes from binaural sound originally, yes. Maybe emulates the way the human brain hears sound, and very critical for VR, yeah, for the consumer experience. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the temptation is always to go down the track of trying to recreate reality, and that is definitely a very kind of important thread within 3D audio. But I think as we've done with stereo music production or creation of stereo content, there's this sense of maybe creating some kind of hyper-real environment where you actually over-exaggerate certain effects, and you don't try and necessarily recreate how something would have sounded in real life. You just utilize that kind of palette or that canvas in a way that sounds good. And coming from a music production background, I guess I'm less interested in necessarily making something sound accurate. I just want it to sound cool.
Fair. Any thoughts on that? I mean, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, that question is always the first questions if we talk to investors or anyone. I mean, we have surround sound, isn't that sufficient? And then I say, yeah, but surround sound is only the horizontal plane. Then we talk about, okay, then we have like Oro with 10.1 or Hamasaki 22.2. Then you have also sounds from above you. But if you really want to have audio objects, then it's a huge difference to surround sound. And I mean, even surround is only placing sound sources between two different loudspeakers is also just getting near to objects, but it's not as the real experience of the real listening. So it's always getting close to reality. And that's what you were mentioning. The reality is we were trained to, as sound designers, we were trained to create artificial sounds in movies or games that are exaggerating sounds and all that. And now with VR, we have to get a step back and say, okay, now we really want the reality to have it as realistic as possible and not as booming or crashing as possible. So that's totally new for all the content creators.
People talk about the quality of immersion or immersiveness when it comes to VR programming. And I mean, you know, I hear a lot of talk about 360 video. In fact, I hear much more than I do about audio. So fair to say that for a consumer experience, you need the audio to match the immersive video as well, yeah?
Yeah, not only that, but also can audio be like the guidance for your audience to where should they look to, because if you can position an object which gives audio feedback in front of somebody or behind somebody, you can just guide him to look there. It's not only, and you're gonna need that in VR in 360 videos, because people are not always going to look in every direction to see what happens in your scene.
Yeah. Yeah, so, oh, please go ahead.
No, it's, excuse me. An anecdote that someone told me once was they were in a VR experience with stereo audio, and they're sitting on a bench next to someone like this, and for the whole thing they're sitting there and they think the guy's talking to them, and then they went back and did the same experience with positional audio, and then they realized there was someone sitting to that side of them, and they had no idea and didn't even bother to turn around. So I think in that kind of experience, it's almost too obvious to say. I think 3D audio is absolutely crucial for VR. I think everyone's kind of collectively aware of that now. So it's more about how we choose to implement it, I think, is the question.
Yeah, so, you know, some of us have backgrounds, a lot of us here in music, in different parts of the music industry, and, you know, when we were talking about this before we got up here, but whenever you mention high fidelity audio, you know, it suddenly becomes part of this niche, basically, and people maybe roll their eyes and think it's a minor niche part of the market, not kind of the common market. And do you think that, you know, VR, it's going to be a newer form of growth for audio and the importance of it, or is it going to still be kind of the same sort of niche thing going forward that not many people understand or appreciate?
I think it's it really like 50% of the complete experience. If you look at a VR horror experience like Paranormal Activity from VRWorks, they really use the cues from a horror movie we know really well and use that as a guidance to let the user experience it at their own pace. Like you're entering a room, you see this really creepy music box, and when you look at it, it starts playing this child song, which really reflects to the horror movies we know. That's a really nice use of 3D audio, and I think that's really important to really get this immersion.
Yeah, I think it'll have a huge impact on the music industry or the music formats you were asking for, because I mean it's going to be the next step in formats, audio formats. So I think the AES convention, it's the Audio Engineering Society convention for where some standards are being made. It's full of spatial audio talks and panels and demos and technologies there, and they are trying to find a new standard at the moment. So there are approaches like MPEG-H from Fraunhofer and all that. So there are so many ideas to bring in standardization that every user, every sound designer will be able to create content easily. But at the moment, I think we talked about that already half a year ago, there is a war at the moment. So many different solutions on the market. The standards aren't clear. I mean, I think we already talked about that a few minutes ago, that YouTube, when they announced 1 year ago that they support spatial audio in their 360 videos, and they said our standard will be Ambisonic's first order with MBX codec. I think that's the first step to get into a standardization where people all are trying to bring that feature into their technology at the moment. And I think there are a lot of musicians that hear about VR. I mean, it's everywhere in the media, and they want to create content for that. I mean, that's another question, how to create VR music. We could fill the whole panel with it, but they really want to create content for that at the moment, and that will have new ideas, new dimensions to create music and sound.
I mean, one of the things I've helped 3D audio technology in the States called Bach 3D Audio, companies called Bit Cauldron, and there's definitely, there's more than a few 3D audio technologies in the market right now, right? I mean, 2 big ears, Dysonic, it's a long list. I mean, is there something distinct about any of these that, without maybe naming names, that you think could give one of them a leg up on the others? Or do you see this kind of mix of technologies out there for a long time to come?
I mean, this is going to sound like a sales pitch because I've got a vested interest in this company, but one of the companies we work with through the incubation program, OSIC, they ran an amazingly successful Kickstarter last year, top 40 ever, like beat Oculus on that. So they're very, very popular. And what they do is they take care of what I call the rendering end of the whole chain, which is once spatial audio has been created, stored, or transmitted in some way through some format like Ambisonics, they take care of how it's presented to the user. Which generally, if you're not using a piece of hardware that's specifically for that device, you're using generic headphones and a software filter, basically. And I think their approach of using hardware, using sensors, using multiple drivers, using a bit of calibration, solves a lot of the problems that are causing maybe a suboptimal performance from some of the other systems. I think there's a glass ceiling on how good 3D audio can sound if it's software only. All the technical reasons, like people's heads are different, blah, 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 blah. I think you really need an intelligent device to render sound properly in 3D.
So about the integration, anyone else?
As you mentioned, Seth, there are a lot of different audio technologies out there. I think some have some advantages, others have some other advantages, and right now, it's really it's important that the developers or people who wants to use these audio technologies, they have a way of comparing them side by side, because or else it's very difficult to actually choose what you want to go for. So that is one of the most needed, you can say, workflow implementations that we need at the moment, a way to compare these technologies, and not to sound like this is a sales pitch as well, but we at Audiokinetic, we are working on actually making that possible. And also to add to the question before around the music industry, I find it extremely exciting to see what is going on, for instance, with Björk and her team releasing a VR album. I've been taking part in helping the team behind, and they are basically, they're not concerned so much about the technology and the different formats, but they are just trying. They are trying and failing, and just seeing what it can really end up with is exciting to me. I just watched or experienced some of her VR album, and the material is really, really nice and immersive on the audio side.
Oh, that's very cool. And Fabio's got I think, a fantastically interesting approach to VR and artists and music. I mean, quite different than some of the other VR platforms I've seen.
Yeah, and it's we're also going that approach. I mean, for me, I'm implementing all of the audio stuff into the game engine later on, either using NOYS or FMOD or whatever. I try out for every scenery. I try out a different plugin because I see, okay, for the one it's better to have the natural reverberation, which the one plugin offers. For the other one, it's better to have a reverb effect I can pull on later on, and that's probably the way it's going to be for the next few years, because like you already said, every plugin or every piece of software will have its advantages, and which needs to be considered for the use case you have.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of interest in music, kind of encourage us to ideate a little bit, but one of the things I'm seeing just broadly in sort of in the States, we're seeing like a content ecosystem kind of emerge around VR. There's studios, there's TV production companies, there's all the elements of a media ecosystem forming. It's not yet. There's even a whole enterprise business as well. But to zero in on music for a second, I think one of the things I'm seeing and I believe in is that this is a platform or a medium where it may not be good enough to just say repurpose, an old catalog record, or to approach it the way you would a video portal, like, I don't know, a Viva, for example, where you're just plunking an artist's video on there, basically. It might be something where you want to do something unique or different with the artist, whether it's completely different user-generated form of programming or in the concert. You're doing stuff like this with your artist, right?
Yeah, that's true. We're basically taking the artist and considering the hardware he already has and giving him a chance to produce audio VR content somehow, because we thought about, okay, what about 360 video? Is that the way to approach? And we saw pretty early that even if such a 360 video would be live, like the people who are really on the concert, so the people which you see around you will always have a better experience than you have while watching it in VR or wherever. So we thought, okay, why not using the advantages of game technologies like game engines and putting people in there to have a social experience, communicating with the artists, interacting with each other, throwing likes on the artists, whatever, to have some new kind of experience, and not just to copy what exists out there.
So we're jumping around a little bit. I want to get back to music in a second, but let's just talk about like the idea of adoption. Like what is it going to take for people to really appreciate 3D audio, to use VR in a bigger way? And I'm sort of curious about, incumbents, Oculuses, Magic Leaps, HoloLenses. I mean, aren't these guys going to have some influence on some of the stuff we're talking about in some way?
Maybe also parties like Unity or Unreal, who basically use technologies to use spatialization like this. Maybe you can compare it with lighting and shadowing. Basically what you can do is bake all your lighting and shadowing. What you maybe also could do for audio is bake all your specific audio probes, where you can don't have the heavy computing of doing all the real-time audio reflectiveness. But I think Unity or Unreal or game engines in general could also be influential for this.
Yeah, I think what VR is doing to music is raising an awareness of what 360 media looks and sounds like. And I think what we're hoping for is that there's going to be like a spin-out knock-on effect. So once you take the goggles off and you put your stereo headphones back on, you think that's weird, which I think probably will be the case after a while. You're used to hearing things spatialized, and then you go back to this in-head stereo thing, and it sounds weird. And we hope that that's going to create a momentum towards people wanting to create music in 360. But I think the barrier to that happening right now, we talked about this sort of beforehand, is that like as a music producer or as someone who's never made music in a non-linear way, it's really, really hard right now, really confusing. Like what do you even Google? And then you get Reaper, you get like Wires, which is very, very intuitive, I'm sure, but like basically it's a confusing landscape for people who are from a music production background, and so I think that needs to be solved first.
I see.
Make the tools available, make them easy, and allow people to fail creatively. I think that's how these types of things move forward.
Sense. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think so the tools were available already for the game industry, and 3D audio isn't something new for the game industry, I would say. But yeah, people are recognizing it now because it gets more important with immersive content like VR. And the music industry and the audio industry needs to realize that and realize what are the tools to use and what works better, what works worse.
I I think there are a lot of great technologies out there for 3D audio already. What we are looking at right now is also the content itself. It needs to be as good as possible. And what is good as possible? I think it has to do with, you know, where the 3D audio can add something to the storytelling, to the actual experience. Just hearing 3D audio is not necessarily going to blow people away, but take an experience like Notes on Blindness. That experience is extremely interesting because it tries to emulate how a blind person perceives life with sound. That is just one example, but those experiences are what really captivates people when they try to really listen in on 3D audio for the first time. So all in all, I think it really needs to be the content that will be focused on also right now, not necessarily on the technology.
No, I think that's a great point. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add the VR applications like the Waves VR and Soundstage, which are really cool audio games, I would say, or audio experiences for creating music, and they definitely use or will use 3D audio technology. And this is something, if you focus all the experience on audio, the people will get used to it more and have nice experiences with that. And I think those experiences are very important to bring 3D audio more into VR. And the other thing to bring 3D audio more into VR is always to show the stereo 3D audio comparison. So when we showcase a demo, it's always starting stereo normal, and then we switch, and then it flips to 3D audio, and that's when people say, wow, okay, that was a difference.
There it is. Yeah, cool. Let's talk a little bit about markets. I mean, this is about VR principally, but some of the things we've tried in the States, actually I know Audiokinetic is active in this, is just looking at other places where 3D audio could make an impact. So speakers, headsets, certainly. The auto is a place where the kids can listen to something in the back, presumably, and the adults can listen to something in front of me. Are there other markets out there outside of VR that you think could move the needle and be game changers for this technology?
Yeah, definitely. There is, like you mentioned, the automotive industry to really have auditory interfaces. When we talk about a system where you hear where other cars, for example, are going, you have like audio signals from that direction. This is interesting. Of course, video conferencing, where you're really able to separate all the 10 different male people with a deep voice, and you don't know who's speaking to you. If you have the positions of them, you're able to separate them. So this is important, definitely. Also I mean, if we don't look at the VR and AR market, it will definitely be also the educational market where you are able to experience music like it was played 200 years ago or anything like that. So there are many different markets.
Yeah, I wonder if it's always integrated with video somehow, or it could just be standalone. It could be both, I guess, yeah. Audiokinetic has some involvement in some of these, not to put you on the spot, right? But I think you're pretty active in trying to enable it for lots of different industries, right?
Yes, I mean, speaking of the automotive industry, that's definitely where we do a big push at the moment, because we see an actual need for how our technology can make an impact there. Another industry is the simulation industry. The simulation industry is estimated to become like a $12 billion industry by 2022. So this is an industry we are really actively looking into because we know that there's a lot of, you can say, verticals, businesses that needs 3D audio within that field.
Yeah. So is it fair to ask about business development or business models? Are there any of these enterprises that will have, whether they're licensing fees or some type of revenue associated with it, or is it too early to even talk about that right now? Anyone want to take a stab at that? I guess it's too early now.
I mean, I can tell who we talk to, and not the names, but maybe where it's possible to license 3D audio technology. I mean, that's of course the software part, but the hardware, like chip manufacturers. I think Qualcomm is also quite interested in object-based audio. And the automotive world, definitely, it will be interesting. Instruments, like music instruments, I think Yamaha announced something a few months ago or a year ago already, where it's possible to license it. So besides the software part, there will definitely be gadgets or tools that will implement 3D audio in the future.
It sounds a little early on the tech side, but you want to add?
I was just going to say, I think the where it's going to fall down, or where it's going to end up lying down, say, who is going to end up paying for it is, I think, going to depend on who really cares about it. I think there's a bit of an unknown right now as to how much of the market really actually cares about 3D audio. I think in VR, like I said earlier, it's absolutely crucial and everyone's going to care. Outside of that, I think there are question marks about whether it's, say, in music, and actually a desirable effect, or whether people will prefer stereo. And in other markets, whether it's going to be useful and whether it's going to be acceptable enough to be useful. So I think there are big questions about whether it's mature enough yet.
Fair.
In VR, I think it's already there. But in these other markets, I'm not quite sure yet. So I think it's too early to call who's going to pay for it.
It's quite fair. I know from my perspective in the music industry, it's half the size it used to be, at least from if you look at recorded music, and that there's a lot of reasoning behind this. But streaming services, everyone's trying to get the adoption of premium services, basically, whether you're trying to convert more Spotify or Deezer subscribers, that's probably key to at least the recorded music industry's growth, basically. But I think VR, and we talked about this a little bit, is potentially an incremental revenue stream if you're licensing music out, right? And that might be a sponsor or an advertiser that wants to create a music VR experience. Maybe it could be a premium app, yeah? I mean, I think that's what some of the goals could be, yeah?
Yeah, that needs to be watched in the future. I believe probably users will be happy to have music VR content and are willing to pay for it. Otherwise, you need to find ways around it. I believe in the moment it's pretty harsh to predict how it's going to be in the future, because users who buy VR headsets already have this really high price tag to get into the system, and I don't know if there's a need to give them another price tag to buy an application to watch this content. On the other side, you want musicians to create content somehow, and you don't want them to pay either, because otherwise they say, why should I create this content? And then there's also this whole new licensing thing. I think there could be new licensing models with music and audio in VR, and it's not predictable how this is going to end, because it depends on how the music companies will look on it.
Well, I think artists as well. I think certainly you're closer to the action on projects, but I think I've started to see in the States labels actually calling and asking for 3D audio or VR, something cool that's part of the marketing process to cut through the clutter, basically. So I mean, it could be a critical part of the mix. Yeah. Why don't you guys are sitting out there, anyone have any questions or want to engage us on all this? Kind of in an open floor here.
So, how do you think the 3D audio might have a different history that had quad audio, which wanted to do that, bring a new standard to music with the speakers behind, and finally failed completely? Nobody knows about quad audio now in the market. So how 3D audio will do better than did quad in the past?
I think 3D audio will be different because it can be used with normal headphones and you don't need to buy actual new hardware for it. So I think that could be the main difference.
Yeah, I think it's a convenience issue. It's massively chauvinistic, but people talk about the wife factor. Wives don't want 5 speakers in their front room, right? It's like, that isn't me talking, by the way. But that's a big issue. And for surround sound or quad to work perfectly over speakers, you have to sit in the middle, unless you're being tracked by some kind of camera system. Whereas if you're in headphones, the sweet spot moves with you, and that's not just interesting, that's crucial. So I think that's why it's got more of a chance, but it still suffers from the same content production issues. Like if no one was producing quad, no one was buying quad speakers, and then the whole system, the whole kind of ecosystem died. I think the saving grace for 3D audio is that there is some 5.1 content already out there. It's really weird stuff, but there is quite a lot there from the 90s. And so if that can be used as like a bed to get people interested, and VR can be used as kind of part of that snowball, then I think more people will hopefully get behind that.
So one extreme example is at the university we had the binaural people and the wave field synthesis people. You know, wave field synthesis means 100 loudspeakers in a row around you, and you even though don't have heights or anything with that. And I was always wondering, how will this ever work? I mean, who's going to buy this? And that's what happened, that the companies that did this. And I mean, on the other side, there are billions of headphones out there that are able to play back binaural audio signals. So that's definitely a reason why it will succeed, because everyone has a device, everyone has a smartphone, everyone has headphones, everyone has a smartphone with tracking information in it. So you also, in the first test, we put our headphones on the smartphone on the headphone to have a head tracking. So we had full head tracking, binaural rendering, anything only with my normal small smartphone I had.
I mean, we hear a lot in the States, the comparison to 3D television, which, you know, is a parallel model to what you just said. It's all these great experiences for consumers. You have some of the biggest hardware manufacturers, Samsung, whatever, coming out spending millions in marketing on it, and the consumer response has been maybe blah, right? It's considered a failure. I mean, the thing that I think is different about 3D audio is just the multi-platform ability of it. Whether we're talking VR, AR, I believe in the car environment a lot. If a General Motors and a Ford wants to start putting that in cars, I mean, that's a business-to-business model. That could, you know, there's some things out there with it that I see it as multi-platform, and I think it's increasingly critical. I think fidelity could be critical to these streaming services, that whether you're Spotify or you may be familiar with the Tidal or a more obscure one called Pono, these are all bringing music to people, and some of them have fidelity as a piece of it. So I think that there's a lot of different potential aspects of different platforms that'll make it succeed. Maybe don't look at it as a standalone, I think is sort of what I'm saying. I just want to add to that.
I also think it's very interesting how 3D audio can be a part of our lives with hearables, the way we can filter out certain sounds that we don't want to hear. That might be a part of our daily lives be in the very near future, because we have the technology, and as soon as we can produce something that is small enough to maybe not be so visible, then we will see more people adapting to this technology in their daily lives. Speaking about music production, I also think it's interesting that the whole 3D audio aspect is really enabling people who used to work in a real studio, acoustically treated studio. They can now start to work with a pair of headphones. That's a huge thing that we should also maybe discuss a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, you mean simulating a studio with your headphones? That
Yes.
was the Smith Realizer. I think 10 years ago it started with a hardware device, quite expensive. No one really bought it. But now the second version, I think, is very successful at the moment. And you were able to switch between different studio rooms. Like, now I want to have Sound City Studio, playback sound, and it sounds exactly the same. And all that with measured individual HRTFs. One question, who of you knows HRTFs? Because we just talked about that.
Head tracking.
Head-related transfer functions. Okay, that's a basic thing about 3D audio, so I'm not going deeper into that. But the Smith Realizer...
That was on the banned words list, you're not allowed to say that.
Sorry?
That was on the list of banned words for this panel.
These guys said they knew 3D audio, so it's fine.
I was just wondering. But I think Waves also brought up this idea to simulate different studios and mixing rooms. So it's quite interesting to have that. Yeah.
Anyone, come, please.
Actually, I've missed several minutes of your panel, so please interrupt me if you talked already about that. Regarding positional audio, the importance is already visible because it is sometimes baked into the APIs of the virtual reality SDK or API providers. So NVIDIA is targeting also on positional audio because it plays a role. And what I think is somebody of you, I think it was you, Christian, mentioned notes on blindness. Notes on blindness. This makes, the not impaired people able to get an idea of how it can be. But we have impaired people, actually. So we have people which are blind, and virtual reality is not only for the ones who can see. So, and we can help them with positional audio because they orient themselves in the world with the help of especially hearing. So it is very important, I think, also to include these persons into this technology, into this new world. And also, there was another thing I wanted to say, but I forgot it. I will mention it later.
I just want to answer on the blind people because it's quite interesting, even in the health sector. But in our first year, when we founded the company, we created a 3D audio game for mobile for a big German broadcasting station, and it was 3D audio, so it was like a radio play, a Hörspiel in German, and it was fully in 3D audio. Everything was moving around you. It was a thriller, and you hear a gun and everything there. And blind people really liked it. But then after we released it, we got very angry calls from the blind. What is it called? Verein, like associations, blind association. They said, okay, we love your app because it's totally focused on the sound, but it's not accessible for us because there of course were some user interfaces to start it and to select things, but they really like the idea of 3D audio. And when we released just a tech demo of the engine where you play around with the app and could move a sound source around you, they really liked that. And I mean, that's a very, very good part that you mentioned, that blind people, I mean, ears are their eyes, and if you're able to simulate anything with the sound, even the positions and anything, they are very happy about it. But I mean, then we get back to the economic side. Is there a market for blind people? How many are there who would buy something that is only for blind people? Or maybe there are like solutions that are working for seeing people and blind people, but then they have to be accessible for them.
I mean, one thing I would just add is, I mean, I think it's an incredibly valid point. I think, and you don't want to diverge too much from audio, but there is enterprise potential or business-to-business potential for VR, for AR. Certainly audio is part of it. I mean, professional sports teams, academic institutions, airline pilots. You get down a pretty long list of industries that could somehow appreciate and integrate this technology. We have a concern in the Midwest of the United States that connects veterans who can't be at special events like funerals or weddings for their fellow friends or families, basically, that's doing it purely out of goodwill. They're not looking to develop music models or gaming models or anything related to entertainment. It's frankly just an enterprise business. I think that's very valid. Yeah.
One field of innovation I think is really interesting at the moment is also how we can translate visuals into 3D audio signals. And for the blind people, one thing is to be directed down a street. Another thing is to enter a room. You don't know what's in there, but if you wear a pair of glasses that can take that visual information and translate it into something 3D audio-like, that could be a new way of helping blind people. So definitely, I think that's super interesting.
Kind of half related, but picking up on the thread of augmented hearing, I guess I call it. And I think there will be a time in the not too distant future where people are wearing a hearing aid-like device at all times. I think that's probably going to happen. I'm still waiting for someone to create the audio Pokemon Go, right? Like, why has no one done that? Like, if you geotag sounds and then you can walk around them and localize them, like a world-scale binaural game. Wow. There you go. Someone should make
Excellent
that.
idea. Maybe we just came up with the greatest idea of the panel yet. So.
Patented.
Okay. That goes back to Abbey Road for officially.
Could I add the thing that
you're working on it? Nice.
Could I add the thing that I've forgotten? So the third thing, which is the anatomic proximity of the vestibular organ. So I heard about headphones which even help you not to hear positionally something, so 3D audio, but which influence the vestibular organ in order to make you believe that you're moving in a certain way, or that you're even losing weight, so Schwerelosigkeit, maybe you help me, so that loss of gravity, that you can even, experience movements that you're not performing actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've been to South by Southwest convention last year, and there was at the South by South Interactives, there was that Samsung innovation booth, and there they had that headset for you, where you got like a liquid on beside your ear, and you got that headset, the headphones, and then it was simulating the acceleration when you were in a VR experience of a car racing. I mean, immediately if you play a VR car game, you get motion sickness. In the first curve, you get motion sick. And at that point, it stimulates with electronics your ear somehow in the right way, that you really have the feeling of, wow, okay, is that what you're talking about? Yeah. And it definitely worked. But after that, my co-founder and me, we tested it. We felt like being in a test machine or something like that. And it was so in the early stage that we thought, okay, is this good for our health, or will in 20 years people find out like radioactive things are unhealthy? After 10 years they found out that this is totally unhealthy because we were distracted with electronic boosts in our ear. That was quite heavy, but it somehow worked, let's say that. And they said it's an early stage. They tested it on 500 people. So Samsung is up to this, and I think every senses this organ has will be used or synthesized to create any experience that you have. Yeah.
We have time for maybe two more.
My question kind of is more about gaming. It's more focused on gaming. Basically, I was wondering if, seeing as how 3D audio will react to an actual space, like an acoustic space that you find yourself in, if it has a part to play in the future of like procedural audio and music, if you think that, basically, do you feel that they go hand in hand, that by developing new tools with 3D audio, you get more reactive procedural audio environments, and maybe tools like NOYS and so on could streamline that process of getting procedural audio into 3D spaces?
I think procedural audio is still a very, very interesting topic. There's a lot of new things going on in the industry regarding to procedural audio, and in fact now we're starting to see tools where you can build something in pure data, and you can actually create your own plugin. It could be a NOYS plugin, it could be another type of plugin. So definitely, I think procedural audio is going to be a big part of the whole 3D audio revolution, which is happening now. And I would be more than happy to talk to you more about this after the panel.
Yeah, I think there's a big future for that, the marriage of room scale interaction with procedural audio and 3D audio. And to create this kind of immersive, maybe therapeutic, maybe just fun, but this like multi-sensory musical, playroom that you find yourself in. I think your app is kind of getting close to that. And there's a guy in London called Yuli Levtov, his company's Reactify. He's kind of working on something for the Daydream like that. And I think it's just the early signs of something which could become quite big. I don't know why. I find that attractive, but I just like the idea of just losing myself in this musical cloud. Or something, I don't know.
Cool, thank you. Did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I was just wondering, when we talked before, we were talking about ambisonics and object-based audio. Maybe this is something we have to give the audience to know the difference, because that's, if you ever will work with audio, you will have to know what's the difference between that. And I think, to try it in one word, object-based audio means if you are in Unity, you have like game objects as sound sources, and they are really moving around you, and they're rendered binaurally by each object and summed up for a binaural bus into your ears. Yeah, as mono sources. And ambisonic means like the approach we have in stereo or in surround, that you mix in advance all the things together in that bus, that ambisonics bus, and that I think NOYS already supports that you have only the audio signals and don't need any metadata anymore. That's the huge difference. You don't need metadata for that, where the sound sources are placed. And that's the reason why Google or YouTube choose ambisonics as their format, because you don't need the information where someone who's talking and moving around you is situated. And that's a huge difference. I mean, the difference of sounds, how good ambisonics sounds in comparison to object-based binaural is another question, but in terms of usability, that's very important for everyone to know that.
Excellent.
I was thinking about what about another way around, so that like a sound would include metadata that would interact with the game objects, and like that way around. So you could like include the sound to interact with game objects and such. If you get what I'm trying to articulate.
Maybe the question is about integrating sound with gaming objects. Is that what you're saying?
Like like another way around, like, and not like sorry, I'm not native English, so
You can speak in whatever language you like, so feel free. Provided we can understand it. So go ahead.
yeah.
A little louder, please.
I was thinking about if you have like this crazy beat going on, you would integrate it within the game, or with the metadata integrated to the sound file itself. Would that be possible? I think it would be really great within game engines.
The integration of metadata into the game.
Yeah, I talked to a few people about this matter today, we as well, I think. It would be something like you could implement the MIDI data into a game engine. I know from a few people who are working on this, but I don't know if there's something around. Probably you could know, so that you could use the metadata in the game engine to visualize something. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of it's a huge topic, actually. There's a lot of things going on, and I think we should definitely catch up on that afterwards.
Yeah, that's good.
It's going to be a longer answer, but thanks for asking.
Right.
All right. Folks, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks for your attention today.